illusion of explanatory depth.
Yeah.
This is a great psychological phenomenon. I'm sure you've read about it.
I'm not I've heard of it.
This is the thing that if you ask people, do you understand how a helicopter works?
Right.
They're like, oh, of course I do. And you go, okay, so how does a helicopter go from hovering to moving forward? And they go, oh.
Yeah.
Well, why does a helicopter have blades on the tail
on the back
that are like perpendicular to the ones on the top, the big ones? And they're like, oh, I guess I don't really know how a helicopter works. Partly it's that there's just no end to what you would need to know to fully understand something. And so we just have to default and say, yeah, I do. I get it. I got it.
It depends on the level that you're looking for, right? Like if I sort of walked into this room and I was like the architect and I turned to the decorator and said, why are the walls blue?
Mm-hmm.
They say, oh, because, Johnny in the wallpaper department told us.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, cool, that makes sense. Whereas if it were a physicist saying, why is the wall blue?
Right.
And you say, well, because the decorator said this. Yeah, but why is it blue? And you say, oh, because of the wavelength that's bouncing. Okay, great. And then you ask the philosopher, says, why is the wall blue? They're like, oh, because there's this electromagnetic wave that's bouncing off. And yeah, but why am I experiencing an electromagnetic wave? And you can keep asking why.
Yeah, why is blue blue?
Yeah.
How come when I look at that wall, the wavelengths don't cause me to taste hamburgers?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. That's a great way of putting it.
That's the philosopher's question.
Exactly. And it's actually kind of a continuum. It's not like you've got three different questions going on there. I think you've just sort of got a slightly deeper level of explanatory depth. So like with the helicopter, well, the helicopter flies because the blades rotate. Cool. Or you could say, why does that? Well, because of lift. Yeah, but why is air there in the first place? What is air made out of? What are atoms,
Right.
And ultimately, I think that the scientific method tells you what things do, that it describes things. To the extent, Philip Goff was just sat in the chair that you're in now, and he's talked about this a lot, about the fact that ultimately, when you break down what something is, say the table's made out of wood, the wood's made out of atoms, the atoms are made out of electrons and quarks, and you say, well, they've got mass. And you get to these foundational qualities of the universe like mass and charge. And you say, ask a physicist, what is mass?
Yeah.
What is charge? And they'll define it in terms of what it does. And there's never actually, at the very root, there's never an answer to like what is the universe made out of? What is the reason why this is happening? And that science is essentially just describing. So you're left with this, maybe I'm just trying to justify the existence of philosophy, which sometimes you have to do amongst scientists. But I think there is this like ontological gap at the bottom of science. Interestingly, Philip Goff fills that up with consciousness.
Okay, yeah.
Says consciousness is the thing itself. And,
well, consciousness could be like a third thing. Yeah. There's matter, and there's consciousness, and there's what else am I thinking of?
I don't know, maybe like form. We could say that it's a foundational property of the universe. You've sort of got mass and charge and consciousness.
Right. Consciousness is just one of those
foundational features. Yeah.
It doesn't come about when matter's arranged in just the right way.
Yeah, it's just there.
It's there, and we just need to include it into our standard model somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure that might happen. I'm still too much of a reductionist to accept that. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I could arrange mechanical levers and pendulums in just the right way, and it would suddenly have opinions and think and believe it existed.
Yeah. Well, I think, and Philip Goff is what's known as a panpsychist.
Yeah.
And I've been exploring this view too myself, the view that sort of consciousness is more foundational and ubiquitous and more simple for that reason. I think you could say that, like if you did put a bunch of, levers and nodes and stuff together, that you would give rise to some kind of conscious experience, but that's because it's there at every level, So of course you can take conscious foundational stuff and put it together in a way and get a big conscious thing, but that's explained by the fact that consciousness sort of abounds
how
everywhere.
Does he define consciousness?
In the same way that everybody does ultimately, which is to first say, well, it's a difficult thing to do, and then I don't know if he would endorse this definition, but the most popular one is Thomas Nagel's that he gave in the 70s, that to be conscious, if something is conscious, there is something it is like to be that thing.
Okay.
So it's like experience. You know?
So to a panpsychist, there is something that it is like to be
An electron.
an electron,
Yeah.
then how rich is that being?
Extremely simplistic. So the idea is that like the big mistake that people make for the panpsychist is that consciousness requires complexity.
Yeah.
When instead, all you need complexity for is some of the really complex things that consciousness sometimes does, like memory, or like persistence of self through time, or emotion, or desire, or anything like that. But so suppose, for example, that you like you're conscious right now, I presume. Imagine I took away your eyesight, right? You couldn't see anymore. You'd still be conscious, right? But you couldn't see. Imagine I took away your hearing. You're still conscious, but now you can't hear.
Yeah.
So whatever sight is just a form of conscious perception. But it's not what consciousness is. It's just one of the things that consciousness does. If you take it away, you're still conscious.
Yeah, consciousness like deals with that sensory input.
So now imagine that I took away memory.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like we were talking about earlier. I don't mean like, oh, like where am I? I mean like there's no such thing as memory. So in every single instant, nothing gets laid down. What would that be like? Like imagine you were falling through the air and there was no such thing as memory. So in every instant, you didn't know that these were your hands. You didn't remember a microsecond. Would you even like know that you were falling? It seems really difficult to imagine, but it still makes sense for me to say that that thing is experiencing. It's conscious. And so I think if you strip away all of the things that aren't actually consciousness itself, the thing you're left with is actually quite like simple and rudimentary. And so the kind of experience that an electron would have for a panpsychist would be something extremely rudimental, but maybe just enough to do things like, I don't know, repel other electrons. Maybe that's all that the conscious experience consists in.
Interesting.
And that's what we get that breathes life, as Stephen Hawking says.
Do you have a recommended reading list for panpsychist thought?
Oh yes, I mean Philip Goff is the panpsychist guy. He's got a great book called Galileo's Error.
Oh, I have that book.
Yeah,
I just got it and it's on my stack.
You should have brought it. He could have signed it for you on the way out of the door.
Well, I didn't know that he was here before me.
Yeah. He's so he wrote that book, and I think there's an academic kind of version of the case for panpsychism that he's written, which I think is called something like Consciousness and Foundational Matter or something. I don't know. I'll send it to you. But
okay,
I've got
I can look it up too.
A whole list of stuff. Thomas Nagel's What Is It Like to Be a Bat?
Yeah, I've read a lot of Nagel. I've got The View from Nowhere and Mortal Questions, which are just also awesome to read for all kinds of other reasons, not just consciousness.
Immortal Questions, the essay after What Is It Like to Be a Bat, is an essay called Panpsychism.
Did you know that I haven't read that one?
Where he makes the case. So you should read that. Okay. You should read that.
Well, maybe I did, because I think he did spell it out in a pretty nice way where he was like, I'm just saying that there could be like a third thing besides matter and form, or whatever these two things are. Okay, so
I mean, I think it's well worth exploring, but that's why the confusion arises in saying that, the thing that you need for consciousness is complexity. Like consciousness is just this one very simple thing, in the same way that if I like using the example of something like the Empire State Building compared to a rock, right? Imagine I got a rock in the Empire State Building and I asked you, which has more materiality? You'd say like neither, like they're both like as made of material as each other. But I could say, but look at the Empire State Building, look at it, it's got like elevators and light switches and automatic door and all. And you're like, yeah, but it's just a more complex arrangement of what's actually quite a fundamentally simple thing.
Interesting.
And they view consciousness and minds in the same way.
I mean, I've got to read up on this because I could only read so much at a time. So I stuck to a lot of like evolutionary approaches. That's where I started with consciousness. Like if whatever it is that we call consciousness, it must have some purpose, or maybe it had some reason it made us as an organism more fit.
Yeah.
And then I looked at a lot of like information theory, and I have not yet dipped into panpsychism.
Yeah.
So
I think it'd be up your street.
I can't say too much about it, but I have Galileo's Error.
Yeah.
It's like on that list. I've read a lot of Nicholas Humphrey and Carruthers.
Well, the reason he calls it Galileo's Error is because what Galileo does is kickstarts the scientific revolution. And he famously says that, maths is the language, or math is in the American translation, is the language of the universe. And in trying to say that everything which everything which exists and is something that we can apprehend is mathematizable into the language of essentially science of, like this equals this. And he's just precluded the ability to talk about consciousness because consciousness is the one thing that resists. Consciousness is by definition first person and science is by definition third person,
Yeah.
So that's why it's Galileo's error, because he's sort of kicked out.
He's told us that, look, consciousness, whatever it is, it's going to be explainable through math,
exactly,
physics, biology. It can be reduced to the language of nature, which is just math.
Yeah. So there's a weird coincidence here, which is that, we spoke a moment ago about how if you really push the scientist, they're only describing and describing. And once you get down to the very bottom, they're just describing, and there's this ontological gap. Well, what is the thing? And then you think about, in terms of our experience, there's only one thing that we really experience in itself, as a thing in itself, and that's awareness itself. And so maybe if we're missing this sort of ontological isness at the foundation of science, but we also only experience directly as a thing in itself, that plugs in that gap. I guess that's kind of the idea.
So there's something that it is like to be an electron,
according to the panpsychist.
And there's something that it's like to be me.
Yes.
But what it is like to be me is just many more things, because I've got memories and hearing and sight, and I've got nerve endings. And if I lived with no memory, every single instant was a whole brand new thing, I might still know that I was falling because I could feel that there was no G-force on me. I'm weightless in all of those moments. But an electron doesn't have internal parts.
No.
It couldn't experience weightlessness. It couldn't experience motion.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm imagining that it has no memory, it's going to just be like, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And it's not going to go, I'm here now?
Yeah.
I was there?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so
it's a bit weird, right? And that's why I think it's growing in popularity. But it is really weird, and it sounds kind of insane. But then the panpsychist kind of here's the charge and goes, yeah, okay, I think that it's just in the way that you break it down and you say, well, what's mass to a physicist? And they say, well, that's just a foundational thing. And you say, well, so what kind of it's just well, it's just a foundational unit of experience. And they say, okay, I know I sound crazy and insane, but I've spent the past few hundred years hearing you guys say that if you take a bunch of atoms, this lifeless stuff, and you just sort of put them next to each other in the right order, then you get the taste of a burger. To them, that's going to sound insane too. And I think one of the challenges that something like panpsychism faces us with is to realize that anytime you try to explain where consciousness comes from, you have to recognize that it's a bit of a sort of crazy, insane thing that it exists in the first place.
So, how do they answer the question, how does a conscious continuity come about? I'm made of a lot of electrons.
Yeah.
But I'm not made of a zeptillion different things it's like to be.
Exactly.
Why does it become, hey, actually, I'm the one in charge. I'm the overarching thing. I'm the mereological composition of all this matter. And I say what we eat, not you, proton number 8 billion.
Well, the reason I think that you would be fascinated to read this and why it's up your street is because you've just immediately hit on what is known as the biggest objection to panpsychism, the so-called combination problem.
Okay.
Why do these individual units of consciousness combine, in some cases, like a human mind, into one unified experience rather than billions and billions of individual experiences in a way that they don't seem to do sort of everywhere and all over the place? And interestingly, to come full circle, it's a sort of similar question to the parts and the wholes. Why is a leg and a top put together a table, but that doesn't unify with the cup?
Right.
But it's a lot more difficult to answer when it comes to minds, because we experience ourselves as a oneness. And I think that's what motivates Peter Van Inwagen to say that, well, life and people are just, we don't know how or why, but we know that they are actual individual things but the problem is the materialist has a combination problem too, right? So you want to ask the panpsychist, well, why do you put all of these individual conscious entities together and you get one big unified consciousness? Why does that happen? But I want to say to the materialist, you've got a combination problem too. You take a bunch of inanimate matter and you put it together and it combines into one conscious experience. But you've also got the problem of it combining into like a totally different kind of thing, you know? So that is a problem for panpsychism that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
But I think it's a problem plus some for like a materialist, if you know what I mean. But you're right to ask the question, because it's the question that is the sort of the biggest question mark over panpsychism.
Wow.
And I would very much like to go back into academia and specifically study the relation between mereology and philosophy of mind for this reason. I think it'd be really interesting.
They're so related.
Yeah, I think so.